When I first became a college professor in the mid-'60s, teaching American history, like many people teaching American history, I had, this was mostly 20th century American history that I taught. I really had very little to say about race relations or black history, and this was typical of those times. One of the things the civil rights movement did, among many things, was to awaken us to the fact that 12 or 13% of the population were black, and that the race problem deserved a lot more of attention than it was getting. So over time, I, like so many other professors, moved into teaching and writing black history, and I ended up writing a book on the Brown versus Board of Education case, and most recently the book which I suppose got me invited here, entitled Freedom is Not Enough, the Moynihan Report and America's Struggle Over Black Family Life from LBJ to Obama, which is, I mention this so that you may go out and buy it. It appeared to minimal fanfare last spring and is, as the title suggests, a book about the Moynihan Report, what it was, what happened to it, and whether or not it has any relevance to race relations today. So bear with me while I tell you a little bit about the report, which most of you probably know something about, but it really bears reading today. It was a 78-page document written as an internal government report while Moynihan was an Assistant Secretary of Labor in the Johnson administration, and it appeared in the spring of 1965, was leaked over the summer and became known as the Moynihan Report, although in fact its actual title was The Negro Family, the Case for National Action, and it did not bear his name on the cover. But it was his document, he wrote it, and it stemmed from his concerns. Moynihan, as you know, later went on to become a 4-term senator from New York State and was replaced by Hillary Clinton in 2000, and he died in 2003. The arguments of the Moynihan Report, I'm going to be relatively brief with this because I say most of you probably know, these were very liberal arguments. Moynihan was a great fan of Kennedy, which first brought him into the Labor Department in 1961. He was a liberal Democrat, an Irishman from New York City. He really believed that government could make a difference, which is, as I see it, the central tenet of most of what American liberalism means to most people today. He said that the problem facing the Negro family was that there was a racist virus in the American bloodstream, that's a quote, which caused, quote, 3 centuries of unimaginable mistreatment, and which appeared most obviously in the weakness of the lower class urban black family. He made it clear that he was not saying this was true of all black families, but this led to an out-of-wedlock birth rate in 1965 of around 25%. The word he used then was illegitimacy. Even our words have changed. He talked about a black matriarchy, and particularly drawing upon some language from Kenneth Clark, whom he had consulted and who wrote the book Dark Ghetto earlier in 1965. He was, of course, a black psychologist. Moynihan referred to this situation as a tangle of pathology, i.e. a sickness, which was really dragging the lower class black family down. Moynihan's report got to Lyndon Johnson, although we don't know whether he read it, but he certainly read of it and was told of it by Bill Moyers and others in his administration. whereupon he asked Moynihan to write a speech that he, Johnson, was going to give at Howard University on June 4th, 1965, a speech that many people said was the greatest civil rights speech Johnson ever made, in which Johnson made clear, following in the Moynihan Report, that legal equality, which he said was being achieved by the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and would be furthered by the soon-to-be-passed Voting Rights Act of 1965, the United States had to move beyond conferring or guaranteeing legal equality to doing something about social and economic conditions, that is, to promote social and economic equality for Americans. As I say, Johnson gave this speech. It received a fair amount of attention. He said in there, "Freedom is not enough," from which comes the title of my book, and that one had to move into a whole range of social issues. Moynihan's major thought at that time about what to do about this was to do something to turn around the situation of black men, for which, by the way, he was later hammered by feminists. Although in 1965, you'll remember, and we historians really urge you to remember what the past was like, feminism was not a big deal in the United States. Now, the National Organization for Women wasn't created until 1966. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, which was supposedly established by the 1964 Civil Rights Act, was not in fact created until July 1st of 1965. Its first chairman, Franklin D. Roosevelt Jr., was not at all really committed to the project, which was one of the many things which led women, for instance, who were also guaranteed equality by the Civil Rights Act of 1964, to form now in 1966. Well, the Moynihan Report, as I say, was a hopeful document. Moynihan thought that the real answer was to do something to provide greater employment opportunities for black men. Presumably, although he did not spell out in his report, in fact, although the subtitle was "The Case for National Action," he was unspecific, something for which he was also hammered. Critics said, "Well, you're saying all these terrible things about black families, but you don't tell us what to do about it." Moynihan's answer to that was, this was an internal document. He wanted people in the administration to fully understand what was going on, and we'd sit down and seriously figure out what to do instead of rushing into some ill-conceived legislation. But his goal, I think, was to provide greater employment opportunities, probably something like the Works Projects Administration of the New Deal, which provided government employment. He also had in mind all the way through his life, as an Irish Catholic who understood European social programs, a system of family allowances by which all families would receive allowances for their children, whether the families were rich or poor. This is a system of allowances which exists today in many countries, many Western industrialized countries, including Canada, from which I've just returned from a fishing trip. And these are modest, but they do not discriminate against rich people who happen to have kids. They go out to everybody. Therefore, there is no stigma. There is not a great deal of bureaucratic hassle. The money just goes out as it would some other programs. He also believed strongly in birth control. Here, of course, he broke with his religion. Well, as you know, the Moynihan Report ran into a hailstorm of criticism. I haven't time to go into all of this. There's a woman over here who raised a sign and told me I have X number of minutes. I'll try to make it quick. It's just one of these unfortunate coincidences. In the first place, Johnson then escalated the war in July of 1965 in a huge big time, which caused a lot of fracture within his strong liberal Democratic Party coalition. They wouldn't really trust anything that Johnson wanted to do. Secondly, and more important, the Watts riot occurred on August 6, 1965, and lasted for 5 days and received enormous television coverage. This scared a lot of white people who had supported until that time, if they were liberals, an interracial civil rights movement. They started to say, well, maybe they just aren't abused and discriminated against church-going, innocent black Southerners. Now these are angry black urban kids who are destructive and don't deserve help. It also greatly changed the civil rights leaders, who were almost as surprised as Johnson was. He kept saying, why are they doing this to me? You know, Johnson assumed everything was either his fault or the result of what he did.